I'm going to call this meeting to order, please. If you would all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming, and especially thank you to those who made it possible for us scrambling around this afternoon to be able to meet in this venue, and you'll learn more about why when John gives his report. We have no one who has asked for the opportunity to comment on items that are not on the agenda, so we'll move into the report of the secretary, and I'd like to have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Is there a second? Matthew? Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes of the last meeting?
David, are we okay sound-wise? Okay, perfect. All right, I was going to be sure. They can hear you great. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, so a sound's not going to come through in here.
Right.
But it is going to be on the live stream.
Okay. I have a couple things. I didn't make it all the way through, but I do have just a couple things. So on the third page, the third paragraph down, about 6 sentences down, be able to change district-wide. I think that's supposed to be a period and then a capital A, more targeted survey. Page 3.
Can you say that again, Lisa?
Oh, right. You can't hear me. That's right. So third page, third paragraph down, about 6 lines down, starts with be able to change. Period after district-wide, capital A more. The next paragraph down, I think in the third line, at the end of that third line, I think how is supposed to be that. And I did get to page 6 without anything else, and I apologize. I was still working on that.
Does anyone else have any other observations, comments, questions about the minutes? No? All right, in that case, all in favor?
I don't think I can vote, right?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, I can.
You can.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Awesome.
2, 3, 4, that's 5-0. Thank you. That brings us to the report of the chair. We did have a town officials meeting this morning. It was an information-packed meeting. John was there, Ryan was there, Jen and Heather were both there. Do either of you want to speak about? I mean, I have a page full of notes. All right. Well, we got first. John gave a COVID update, what the status of the district is and how we're handling each as it arises. We talked about each of the town managers talked about their dealing with COVID. John gave another explication about the green, red, yellow, red color system as it applies to the schools. We talked a little bit about winter athletics with a potential delayed start depending upon how things go. Dana went out of his way, and I wanted to make sure to say this, that he thanked the district for our assistance in having the election here. He said it went very smoothly, and it was very much appreciated that they were able to use the space and that the custodians were available for cleaning. John, you spoke about the Thanksgiving meals, which you'll speak about again tonight. Perry had expressed his concern about childhood hunger. Just what other things? So many other things. We all talked about budgets, of course. Waiting on numbers from the state. Decreasing revenue is anticipated, but perhaps not as bad as feared. Perry was it Perry or Dana that said that they're expecting a 10% reduction in municipal revenue sharing, and that's going to put a crimp on town budgets. Perry was actually predicting that some towns in northern Maine who aren't going to be able to weather the storm might actually be in a position to have to file for bankruptcy. In local news, pedestrian crossing signs are going in on Main Street at the post office, as well as the new signs that are accompanying the lighted crossing at the central school. Home for the Holidays is not likely going to be sanctioned. Perry reported a general uptick in general assistance. Likewise, Elliott's avoiding big congregating events. Both stressed their giving tree and food bank efforts. I think Dana offered us the use of his mobile LED signs that he got with a COVID grant if we need them for whatever, which was very kind of him. I think that's pretty much what I have for notes. We had a lot. It was pretty information rich. Did I miss anything? John, anything you wanted to add? No? Okay, that was kind of a lot. It was a good meeting. Okay, and I think we're going to have one more town officials meeting this year sometime in December. Yep. Okay, that's 9th of December.
Yes.
Good. I'll make a note of that. Thank you. Second thing on the report of the chair, we booted him out after his last meeting, but we've asked Paul Stanley to please come back tonight for a more formal recognition of his 6 years, 2-term service to the board. Very much appreciated. And the presentation of a gift.
It's really in the box, but that's yeah, 3-year-old. That should be better than appreciate it. No, thank you, Paul, for everything. Thank you.
Paul, if you wanted to give a speech, please use the microphone.
All right. I don't really have a speech prepared. But I will say thank you guys very much for all of your time together on the board. I learned a lot from every one of you. And I would not have had this opportunity if it wasn't for Joe Long, who texted me one day and said, "We need your help." So during the last 6 years, I learned a ton about how the district works and about everything that goes into making this the incredible district that we have for our students. So I will miss parts of it, not so much. I'll still be available if any one of you needs anything. I'm here and happy to support. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes my report. John, report of the superintendent.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. First on the agenda is talking a little bit about the January reevaluation. And so 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation about where we would stand as we kind of had told parents to ask them to hold tight until January and then have an opportunity to kind of see where we're at that point in time. And so I expressed the district's struggle in that first, I think we're in a much different place than we had hoped that we would be at this point in time with the pandemic. And so on one extreme, I think it's important to honor what we said to families, that we would try to take an opportunity to reevaluate. On the other extreme, I don't know educationally that it's sound to take everything into a jug and kind of shake it all up and kind of resort everything. So I think there's a balancing act that we're trying to find. And so I just wanted to fill you in as to where we were district-wide. And I want to be clear that decisions haven't been made yet. We are in the process of making decisions. And we actually have our district-wide committee meeting tomorrow at 3:15. And that is the same group that kind of created our original plan. So we're getting everybody back together to say, look, where are we? We've asked all the buildings to kind of do some surveying to be able to get some information together. So we'll meet tomorrow and have some conversations. Part of that is there's some realities that, for instance, at Marshwood Middle School, the remote academy is full. We have 120 students, 122 students, and we don't have any more space per policy to fit more people in. We've come up with some other alternatives. We want to talk about those a little bit. We want to think out of the box a little bit about, what could we do if we had to make some changes. But really the big push for tomorrow is going to be creating a survey that we're going to send home to families. My goal is to send those surveys home to families on Tuesday. And really, there'll probably be 5 or 6 questions, with the main question basically being framed around that we're not where we hoped we would be. Certainly want to be respectful of the process. We would ask people that, if they could stay put, that would be wonderful. That would work out best for us in the big picture. But if there are extenuating circumstances and people do need to make some changes, what could we do? And if they would be interested in doing that and kind of handling that through the school. So we're trying to kind of tailor that survey tomorrow a little bit. The tricky part becomes, this is a tough time to ask that question as well. Obviously, as kind of what's gone down over the last month or so across the county, so to speak. And then what we'll do is we'll have that survey ready to go. We'll have it dealt with at the building level. When we come back from the Thanksgiving break, it'll give us an opportunity to kind of have those personal conversations with families to figure out where we're at, let them know the options, and be able to go from there. The tricky part is that if we have a group of people from one side wanting to move to another, there's a giant pendulum shift. And so, for instance, what I have said to my staff is that, look, if there is space available over the past time and they can make a move, allow people to do that now. Let's try to be flexible because circumstances change. So, for instance, at Marshwood High School, the system that they have in place is fairly easy to go from remote to hybrid, or from hybrid to remote. Like, obviously we don't want people moving back and forth multiple times, but if you start something and want to try to make a change, then certainly we can do that. Marshwood Middle School is a little bit trickier, where we have plenty of space to be able to offer if people want to come back into school, but we really are very limited when we have the remote academy. At the elementary schools, it's a little bit different, where we have a little bit more space probably remotely than we do in person, particularly like at Central School. Where at Elliott, we might have some more flexibility on either, more so in person. So there's a little bit of a customization at each one of our buildings. And so trying to get some data and then be able to create a plan that's manageable and in the big picture. So again, it's important to try to value our word of what we said we were going to do, but at the same time, we can't destroy the system that we've created halfway through the school year either. Like this is not what we had expected, and we're going to do the best we can to work with people, but we're just trying to find that balancing act. So are there any questions anybody has about that? In each building? Sure.
So I'm just asking about how much specifics we're going to share. I was reading the notes from the last meeting, and it was really clear to me in reading those, because of course I missed the meeting, was just in terms of we like literally don't have the budget to hire additional teachers for the buckets that don't have space. So will that kind of information be shared so parents can really understand how helpful it really is?
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a survey, but it's an interesting problem, because we're trying to create a survey, but also it's going to turn it into an essay.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I think we're trying to find that balancing act of how do we say, here are some parameters when we made these decisions. That's not to say that we can't be creative, but I think we've got to first of all see how big of an issue this really is. And so if I were to hypothesize, I would say 80% of the people, for the most part, are okay staying where they are. I think there's going to be a portion of 20% who would like to move if they could, and we'll see if that we can make that work. But I think we got to get our head around, is it 500 people? Because that's, in some ways, that's an easier problem to solve than if it is 25 people. And I hate to say it that way, but
I know what you mean.
We can adjust a little bit more as the pendulum swings bigger. It's the smaller adjustments that might be a little bit more difficult. So, but yes, we're going to try to give that parameters that, Lisa, absolutely. And I'll share that input tomorrow when we meet at 3:15. Yeah. So just to remind everybody, the process that we use is that we'll start off with the district-wide committee. And so the district-wide committee is all of our building administrators and all of our QEA executive board reps. And then we also include nurses from elementary, middle, and high school. So we have kind of a spattering of people there. Once we kind of have that meeting, we all kind of get our kind of our big picture of what we're trying to do as a district, and then those committees break off into a larger committee that's going to be at the building level. The caveat to that is that we wanted the elementary schools to have the same format. So Elliott, Great Works, and Central School are all going to kind of meet together as an elementary group, but we want to get representation. So we're going to open up some opportunities for people to be able to meet and be able to talk about what those changes might look like. We did put money aside in the CRF grant to pay for this committee work, because obviously if staff are putting some time into this, we want to be able to honor that work, so that is part of the CRF money. So when you see salaries, that's part of what some of that money goes to. So we'll start off with the smaller group, we'll migrate to the bigger group, and a lot of these decisions, we try to make at the building level, because there is some subtleties, that are very different. And so the example that I use is that at the elementary schools, to have a class size of 9 students and be able to keep those 9 students for an entire day really is a model that would work really well at the elementary school. If we were to do that at the high school, you're all of a sudden going to be losing graduation requirements. You're going to be losing class electives, so that there's an impact on that. And so you have to create some flexibility at the high school to be able to still get that high school education that they need. So if kids need to take the 22 or 21 and a half credits they need to graduate, they need to have that smattering of different opportunities. The plus to that is that at the elementary school, it's easier to cohort, so we can keep the cohorts more contained. At the high school, cohorting is a little bit harder because you do have 4 classes every day that you have to transition to. And so that does create another level to what we're doing. And so that's why it's very, very different. The middle school is kind of in the middle, right? That's kind of the idea where their cohort is really classes of 8, but those 8 to 12 kids transition around the building. And so at the middle school, if you were to have a positive test, the kids is fairly clear because the cohort's a certain size. What becomes more difficult at the middle school is that those 8 kids have gone to see 7 staff members or 6 staff members, and so now it affects the staff members' ability to deliver instruction. So there's some balancing that we have to do. And so that will be part of the conversation that we'll have tomorrow and then into December when we meet at the building level. And that's the same process that we used when we created the original plan, just in case people wondered. And then we brought it forward to the board and gave the board the opportunity, and we'll make our recommendations to you. My goal would be to make those recommendations by the 16th of December meeting would be the goal. Any other questions?
Also, I think it's important to, parents might need some clarification. I think if you don't have a child at the middle school or the Great Works school, parents are unclear that if the fully remote group at the middle school is like its own. The high school is more synchronous learning. So if you only have a high schooler, I think you don't understand that the program at the middle school at the Great Works is a much different program. Then that's why at the high school there's more flexibility, not just from a numbers standpoint, but also the way that the instruction works is different.
And to be totally frank, when we met this summer, I was really clear that I did not want teachers teaching remotely and in person at the same time. And that doesn't mean to say they couldn't have a class period 1 that's remote and period 2 was in person, but what the high school is doing right now, that's difficult. And so the teachers are paying the price for those decisions because it creates a different management of the class, and the kids can tell you. But it does allow some flexibility. So the positive to that is it does allow the flexibility that if your entire class were to go remote, it's not as much of a transition as it might be, for someone who's in person all the time. So there's pros and cons to everything that we did.
I guess, and that's why there's some flexibility, because there's been some discussion of why a high schooler last week, the parents want to decide to move their it's different than the middle school program, which is its own
absolutely. And the same thing, why was a first grader allowed to move to the remote academy maybe at Elliott, where a second grader wasn't allowed to? And it could be, and that didn't happen, but just in theory, it could be because second grade is at the class size limit, whereas first grade might have some flexibility to be able to do that.
Right.
So I think it's important, at least, is that to get some of those details out to be able to describe the parameters of what we're doing. What I don't want to do, though, is I don't want to describe the parameters to the point where it justifies us not doing anything, because I think that that's a different mindset as well. So I think we need to say, here's what we're doing now. We understand the promises that we made. To be able to reevaluate this, we need to try to be creative and come up with a solution. And rather than saying we're not going to come up with a solution, I guess then that's why I want to be very careful on how we word those things. So, any other questions on that? Okay, a COVID update. This was going to be very different when I talked this morning at 10 o'clock when we met with the town meeting. So this afternoon, late, I think it was approximately 3:30-ish, I got a phone call from Judy Doran, our nursing coordinator, to let me know that there had been an additional positive COVID test at Marshwood High School. That put Marshwood into having 3 cases within a 14-day period, which can qualify as an outbreak. I think what added some confusion to this situation is that the students hadn't been in school for some time. So for about a week, they had not been in school. And so how does the CDC interpret that? And so we spent some time talking to the CDC, trying to get some clarity on that. And we found that, that we were going to treat it as it is outlined in our SOP and our opening plan. I just think it's important. Take all the noise off of it. This is what we told the community that we were going to do. Safety has got to be the #1 priority. And so I sent out an email this afternoon saying that unfortunately, due to this, we are going to provide remote instruction at Marshwood High School through December 2nd, and December 3rd, Thursday, December 3rd would be the first day that we would be back for in-person instruction at Marshwood High School. Heartbreaking decision, and frankly, I feel horrible about it, just because I would want to avoid this at all costs, but there's not a lot that we can do when you're dealing with a virus. So it's heart-wrenching. It's been an emotional afternoon, but at the end of the day, our job is to keep kids safe and staff safe. And we made a commitment to people on how we would handle that, and we're going to follow through with that commitment. Now, I don't know what the CDC is going to say as they start to investigate. Like, they might say you might need a couple more days, you might be fine. I think right now the CDC has their hands full, to be totally frank. I think on the positive side, we do have the Thanksgiving break that kind of buys us some time, so the implications instructionally are minimized a little bit because we do have some time off next week. So I did talk to Rob Scully today, right after I had called all of you. Our staff left the building at 3 o'clock or 2:50 this afternoon, expecting to show up tomorrow at 7 o'clock and start a school day. They don't have necessarily everything that they need to provide instruction for the next 2 weeks. And so because of that, we cannot start instruction tomorrow. Like, we can't just say we're going to pick up at 7:30 and the schedule's not going to change. So we're going to give an opportunity for staff to go in tomorrow, get what they need together, get their supplies, be able to work from home. The building is going to be closed to them, teaching-wise, at least through Tuesday, and then give our opportunity for us to do some cleaning in the building, which is part of the CDC protocols. And so we'll pick up our remote instruction on Friday. There may have to be some juggling of the schedule around. One of the unique things about the high school is that it's a 4-day schedule, so it's blocks 1 through 4 for 2 weeks, and then blocks 5 through 8 for another 2 weeks. Plus, you divide that in half with the alphabet. And so making sure that you're getting some balance amongst your period 5 kids as you might your period 1 kids. So there might have to be some adjustments made into what remote days look like, but Rob is going to communicate that with his community. So that's where we're at right now. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Please feel free to ask away. From a school standpoint and a personal standpoint, this is the hard part, is that there's no middle ground with this. That people feel very adamantly one way or another, and this is kind of where we are as a community right now. And so, and I think as a country right now, is that there are some people who are going to think, look, we're not doing enough. This is what you should be doing. It's kind of like the conversation about why is it so much easier to transition at the high school from remote to in-person when they don't necessarily know the details of what it's like at Elliott Elementary School. So it's the same type of thing. Like, this is what we should do. And certainly when you look through an individual's eyes, that would be very clear if that was the only lens that we had to look through. That would be part of that. And so I ask the community's patience. We're doing what we said we would do. We haven't varied from that. It certainly, we are at the mercy of a pandemic as the rest of the country are, but I do appreciate the supportiveness, that our entire community have had. But I think I go back to what I said in April, that we have to keep humanity at the center of this. And sometimes as individuals, it's a little bit hard to hear that, but we've got to keep the big picture right now. And ultimately, we have to keep people safe. And that's the guarantee that I've tried to make. And honestly, I couldn't imagine waking up and not doing that. That would be something that I could not manage. So that's where where I am, just as far as the district goes, and how we'll proceed. But did you have something you want to say, Jen? So before this all went down today, I wrote an email on Friday, and I was a little bit torn because, and I'm going to use my words, that Dr. Shaw has been pretty clear about things aren't going very well in the state of Maine as far as COVID goes. And he's using some pretty extreme words that he was really concerned about. And so there's messaging that's there. And then there's messaging that comes out every Friday when the state says, hey, by the way, you're in green, you're in yellow, and what does that mean? And so I was struggling, and I know some of you were struggling, and I know some staff members were struggling, that how can on one hand it feel like, and I'm going to use the word the sky is falling, and I'm not saying that belittlingly, but like there's an extremeness there, right? Which it sounds like it's facts, it's science. But on the other hand, we're saying, but we're still in green. And so I felt compelled to reach out to the Department of Education and say, look, I think that there's a communication gap right now. But I think the communication gap is indicative of where people are right now. It's either one side or the other, and we're forgetting about the middle, like what's the reality of this? So I called Kelly DeVoe, who is really the communications director for the department, was fantastic. And she provided some clarity to say, yes, indeed, the standard to be in green has changed. It has become a little bit, there's more flexibility with it than there was early in September, because if you look at the numbers in September and you look at the numbers now, obviously the cases are higher now than they were in September, but in September we were in yellow and now we're in green. What's going on? And they said they reserve the right to do that in their plan, which they absolutely do. And then she stated, and I put it in the letter, but I think that it's a 19.8% positivity rate per 10,000 people for the state of Maine, and this was a week ago, so it could have changed now. But schools were at 8.8% or 8.8 per 10,000, which so the statement really is that schools are a safer place than the general public, and so that was why there was there's some differences, and I felt like that was an important clarification that I needed to get, because again, I need to give the straight face test. I live in this community. People talk to me. I go to the grocery store. I get the same questions you get, but I wanted to have some clarity for that. So they did provide that. Unfortunately, now we're going to be one of those schools who's going to be, dealing with at Marshall High School. But I just think it was an important part that people understand. So
They're not just looking at they're looking at the numbers, but they're also looking at where are those numbers? Are they concentrated in, say, a nursing home or whatever
exactly
that
right.
plays in? Okay.
Exactly right. Yes, correct. The one thing I don't know, and I don't know if anybody really knows, is what does red look like? And that's kind of the question, is like, what does that shutdown look like? Is that a conversation? Like, where are we as a country right now, or as a state, getting clarity around that? And obviously, that's something that we don't know. And I think so. I wrote into, I kind of equated to kind of being in turbulence. We're kind of getting banged around right now, because if things were to get worse, then it becomes very clear that you go remote. If things get better, everybody can come back. But right now we're kind of in this really strange, up and down, topsy-turvy, not a whole lot of clarity place to be. And so it is a little bit challenging from the school's perspective as to balancing all of that. So, have I missed anything? Important questions that you may have, or? I just think it's important to be as transparent as possible. And if people don't like the answer, that's one thing, but I want to give them the answer, and this is the reason that we're doing what we're doing. I think that's the important part, and I think people have been extremely supportive, but. Nothing else? No questions? Okay. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I just think it's important that we put it out there, is that I've gotten a number of questions from the community saying, hey, look, Biddeford has decided that the week after Thanksgiving, they're going to take a week off just to be precautionary. And so I think I understand their logic for doing that 100%. I think that they feel like people are going to travel. And so that's a way to prevent the spread if people are coming back from a break of some kind. I do think that creates some challenges, and I think that, on the average, for someone at Marshwood High School to say, you know what, you're going to be remote for 2 weeks. I think that's very different than saying to a first grader at Central School, you're going to be remote for 2 weeks. And those are two different conversations, particularly when, you know, knock on wood, that our elementary schools have been in pretty good shape when it comes to COVID. So I just wanted to put that out to the board. You know, that we had kind of said with our plan, when you originally approved our plan, that we were going to kind of follow the CDC guidelines. There may come a point when we don't get guidance from the state that we need to, as a group, that I would bring a presentation forward at your request to say, this is what I think we need to do next. And so I'm not sure if we're at that point yet, but I certainly want to be able to put that out to all of you, because I know there's some questions that you've been getting, and I just want to be able to hear what you would like me to do. If anything, at this point, if we want to hold tight, what would we like to, you know, how would you like me to proceed at this point?
I think you're on the right path. We had this conversation earlier today. I think sorry, I'll start again. I think you're on the right path. As we spoke of today, the decision to close the high school for 2 weeks, I think, is spot on. It's in line with the protocols we established, and it errs on the side of caution, which I think, given our commitment to safety, is the right way to go. So I think, and I'll ask fellow board members to chime in if they wish. I think you're on the right path.
If that may change in the next 2 weeks. I just think it's going to depend on how the environment, like what happens, you know. And I think we just got to be, you know, I am prepared to have that conversation. You know, it's I don't know if the state's going to view this as a local condition, a local decision, and is that going to make it even more hesitant to go to red for an entire county? Like that's what when I say I don't know what red looks like. That's what I mean. You know, is the state going to say this is the threshold, and we get to this point, we're going to go red, or is there more that goes in that decision other than just a metrics of numbers? There's also going to come a point where we as a community may need to say, time out. You know, what's the best thing for kids? You know. Obviously balancing the fact that it affects families differently. So
Right. That's sort of my thought, is that we do need to think from the CDC's standpoint. We look different as a community than Sanford looks as a community. So numbers are different here than they are in, say, Sanford, for example. Do we wait until we have one outbreak at every school, and then we say, oh, okay, let's pull? Or do we say, okay, this is what the science or the trend is showing, so do we preempt that? I don't know. So I think, yes, it's wise to say at any moment that things could have to change, that what we made in August there might have to be some flexibility, knowing what we're seeing, boots on the ground type of thing.
I don't know what it would look like. Is really good with the numbers. I know that Joe looks at these frequently. Would the board like us to just do a kind of a presentation at our next board meeting on the 2nd to say, look, this is statistically what things look like right now, and so talk a little bit about what our tolerance level is as a district, and be able to have some information about that, because there could also be, and I want to be careful about this, but there could also be, you know, there's some feedback portions that we may want to get some feedback from parents at some point as well with that. And I think, you know, again, you know how I feel about survey questions, that I don't want to ask questions that I can't deliver to, but at the same time, I think it's important to find out what our constituents are feeling. So at the board's request, I would be more than happy to work with Ryan, and we could kind of get together some numbers, maybe even have the nursing staff come to be able to share kind of where we are, kind of a state of COVID address.
I think you've had a COVID update on the agenda for the past several meetings. I think that's a wonderful idea,
Okay.
particularly as the situation threatens to change rapidly.
Okay. Does that make? Okay. And I don't mean to belabor it. This is hard. This is hard stuff. And this is stuff that none of us, had thought about. And it's emotional stuff. You want to do right by people, and you want to do, it is a trying time. So I think that I will talk to the nurses tomorrow. They met with me this afternoon and just said, like, John, if you need us to do anything, please let us know. If you want us to come meet with the board, maybe we can do that. Yeah.
Just one last question, just in terms of communication. I got an email today, obviously from Mr. Scully, because I have a high school student
Yes.
telling me what was going down. You had said in your letter to expect it. If people are not checking their email, how are they getting this notification?
You should be getting a phone call
Great.
shortly this evening.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check on
Yeah,
that. Thank you.
That was exactly. I was sitting at my office at about 5:15, and I saw that my email went out, and then Rob had kind of said the parent letter sent, and then I'm like, this is kind of like a snow day. What happens if a child doesn't check their email, and all of a sudden the kids are waiting at the bus stop in the morning? So we are sending a phone call out this evening just to say, please check your email. There will not be in-person instruction tomorrow at Marshall High School. So yes, good. Yep. Okay, that is the end of my report. Time for student reports?
Instead of just another day of teaching. And also, Interact has suspended all their community service for now, but they're still going to be donating to local organizations instead of just ending everything for now. Are we going to talk about sports?
Can I just add something to your report real quick, if you don't mind? So there has been the change at the high school where Wednesday, if you remember back to when we met in August, Wednesday was never, the idea was never to have a full remote instructional day. That was never the thought process of that day. That day was designed to be a remediation day, a check-in day for students who need that additional support, because you're worried about students who might fall through the cracks because of dealing with the COVID situation. I think what was quickly happening was that some staff were finding that to be a really valuable instructional day because they had all their kids kind of in the same setting and they were able to kind of create that pace. And so one of the things that we're working on with the high school is really how do you take 12 standards, let's say, that you usually take 175 days to cover, and now those days you have to cover have been drastically reduced. And so how do you still cover all of those standards knowing that you're losing time? And I think some staff had some concerns about that. And so that's where this change is coming from. So today, West Ed came in and facilitated some work around how do you kind of work through standards during a pandemic to be able to help staff, because there is some anxiety. If you look at our district policy that says, we have a standards-based diploma, but we also have a credit-based diploma. We kind of run a dual system. And so I wrote a letter to the principal of Marshwood High School and said, share this with your staff as accordingly. But until further notice, we are going to be on a credit-based system. We are going to focus on the credits. We can't hold ourselves accountable to standards that right now that we don't have time to cover all. And I think the staff was getting caught with that. Now, the downside of that is there's some work that we're going to have to do once things get back to normal to get kids caught back up. I mean, I understand that 100%, but we're in the here and now, and I worried about the mental health of the staff trying to kind of keep shoveling, but as much as you shovel, you're not being able to get on top of it. So that's part of the reason why the change came, just to kind of give some context to that. So it's about remediation, helping kids who need some support, as opposed to a day to add more. So sorry, but thank you for bringing that up, though.
So today was the last day to vote for the class president for the junior and freshman class. And so that means we should probably find the election results on Monday. Oh, not tomorrow, I meant tomorrow. And on top of that, so fall sports had their last game sometimes this past week. And in there, both soccer teams played BA. Girls lost 5-0, boys won 2-1. Boys football also had a scrimmage against TA. There wasn't a reported score, but I think they lost. I asked around. And for volleyball, they played against Wells. I think that was one of their first games on the beach courts, and I think it went well. Not exactly sure. I don't have a lot of friends that play volleyball. And then field hockey lost to Biddeford. And then lastly, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the state reported out that winter sports can start practicing December 14th. I haven't heard anything from coaches, but I think that's correct. That's it.
You are correct.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Mr. Buzzell is going to be invited to our second, the December 2nd meeting to kind of talk a little bit about where we are with things. There's been some big changes. Even the last week of the fall sports season, masks became mandatory. And so That created a little bit of a kerfuffle with our cross-country teams, where they had to actually cancel states because I think they felt like the conditions had changed so much where kids were now being asked to run in masks for the first time, and the MPA actually called off the state meet. But the word is that if you're in green, and so like just for clarity, if we're in yellow, there are no after-school activities. But if we are in green, that's when athletics would start, but masks would be required for everything. There's still some question about how they would handle wrestling, I think, is in particular a sport that they have some questions about. Indoor track seems to be kind of a common question that has come up. I think they're coming up with some solutions around competitive cheering. But Rich will be able to share kind of the state of where everything is with that. We're kind of waiting for the final words, but just so people understand that. So there is going to be some difference, and the MPA as a whole said that there are no spectators for any athletic events for the winter season at all. And so we'll go from there. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. We have no correspondence to the board to report on, so we'll move into the reports of the committees. Both our Finance and Facilities Committees and our Policy Committees met earlier today. We'll start with Finance and Facilities. Find my notes. There they are. So does anyone else on the committee want to report on any aspect of this, or? I'll do a quick summary of the numbers. Okay. General fund, both revenue and expenditures are behind budget. Our general fund cash balance which dipped down perilously low last month, or earlier this month, I should say, has now been restored to a healthy value, largely because of the infusion of that $2 million loan and the receipt of some subsidy payments. Federal grants are starting to roll in, so the negative balance on there is getting a little bit better. Adult ed is back to even in terms of expenditures and income. School nutrition continuing to lose money, but at a slower rate. We've been doing some things to control the spend rate, and that's reaping rewards. We've started to get reports now on both the CRF1 and the CRF2 funding. We've now expended nearly $1.4 million worth of CRF1 funding and almost $200,000 of CRF2 funding. And that $2 million loan is intended to tide us over until we get reimbursement on that. There's no clear line of sight yet as to when those reimbursements will come from the state. The process is apparently a little bit convoluted. So again, cash flow projection, we're in a decent place. I think that's pretty much the headlines. Ryan, is there anything that I missed that you think ought to be added? No? Okay, good, cool, thank you. And then, of course, we also talked about facilities and transportation, if someone wants to chime in on that.
As far as the facilities go, notice that the tents are down. For the season, we have 2 tents worth of poles that have some damage to them, and we're weighing the benefits of the repair for those poles. The 2 van purchases with CRF funds. Let's see, food service. We have Thanksgiving meals on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which are available. Portions are large to meet the numbers. I need readers. This is amazing. Holy cow. This basically does not cost the district any money for that. Additionally, with transportation, we followed up with Heather for the in-town South Berwick routes are going to be eliminated for the time being. I think that's about it. It's pretty quiet.
That's what I had in my notes as well. Thank you, Matt. I think that's everything on the finance and facilities. Let's see. Next, we had the policy committee meeting this morning. Jen, would you be willing to give us a readout on that?
It was a tricky one, but I'll do my best, but please chime in.
Okay.
Okay, so we are bringing, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 policies for first readings tonight. ACAA, there was some changes, let's see, some recommended changes from Drummond Winsome, and we were moving towards their recommendation. Is that accurate? Is that the
Yes.
biggest changes? Okay. There was some changes in the transgender guidelines, changes in the definitions there. And then, let's see, help me with ACAE is now what was formerly known as JICIA.
You
So
are
it's
correct.
the same policy, different code.
Yeah, that's right, exactly right.
Okay. Let's see, we're eliminating from that policy. Is that the one we're eliminating? The hunter's breakfast from? That's the one of the bigger changes there.
Yes.
And then JHB, the truancy policy. We had some discussion around changes to the truancy policy. So that's up for first reading as well. What am I missing on ACAAR?
I would add to the ACA-R that the Drummond and Woodson recommendation, which is what we're replacing our current procedure with, is much more detailed.
Substantially.
And it's in response to changes in federal policy and law. Yeah,
And that there'll be some, there's some training needed for the principals and assistant principals who will be considered investigators
For the
under
investigators,
that new
exactly.
Right.
policy.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah.
Correct.
In all four of these cases, what we're basically doing is we're taking, with small modifications, we're taking the Drummond and Woodson recommended replacements and replacing the policies that are currently in place with those. So as the rest of the board sees those tonight, keep in mind that that's basically what we're doing, is taking the recommendation of our council.
Can I add one other quick little thing, Jen?
Yes,
do you
please.
mind? And so the other thing that we looked into is actually Maine School Management, who we work with through our policies, also provides a service where they can kind of go through your policy manuals to make sure all of your policies are appropriately named, and also the cross-referencing is done appropriately. And typically, districts do that every 10 years or so, just kind of as a habit to be able to make sure that their policy manuals are intact, and also gives us some feedback of what we may be missing and what we may want to eliminate. And so we're going to go through that process. It takes about a month, but we'll do that through Maine School Management as well. So that will give us some information kind of as to where we want to go next with our policy committees.
And we ought to be seeing that sometime early next calendar year.
I think February
Yeah,
would,
okay.
would be the hope, yes.
Good.
The goal with the policy committee, obviously, is to try to have those policies looked at least once every 5 years. And so that's a good cycle to be on. But what tends to happen, the more that I've been here to see, is that certain policies start to become very, very hot, and we have to deal with them immediately, and then things get kind of put on the back burner. So this kind of, like, you just don't know how many things you might have lost over the years, and this kind of allows you to kind of recalibrate kind of your prioritization of what needs to happen. So. Thanks.
Okay, that concludes the reports of the committees, and it brings us to the new business section of our agenda. The first few things involve second readings of policies that we voted on at first readings in our last meeting. So may I please have a motion to approve the second reading of the LAO plan policy?
I move to approve a second reading and discussion of the LAO policy plan IHBEA-R.
Do I have a second? Was that Lisa?
I'll
Thank you.
second.
Okay, so nothing has changed in this since we voted upon it 2 weeks ago. There were no further changes made. Anybody have additional questions about that? Then let's bring it to a vote, please. All in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you. May I have a motion on the second reading of the policy AC, please?
I move we approve the second reading and discussion of policy non-discrimination / equal opportunity and affirmative action - AC.
Second.
Second, thank you. Same thing, no changes since last time. Are there any questions? In that case, all in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you. May I have a motion, please, on ACAB?
I'll move that we approve the second reading and discussion of policy harassment and sexual harassment of school employees, ACAB.
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Again, no changes. Questions or comments? All in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you. And the fourth is on ACAB-R, the procedure. May I have a motion, please, to approve the second reading?
I move we approve the second reading and discussion of policy employee and third-party unlawful discrimination / harassment and Title IX, sexual harassment complaint procedure, ACAB-R.
Second.
Jen, thank you. Any questions or comments? All in favor? 5-0. Thank you. May I please have a motion to nominate Lauren Brown?
I move to nominate Lauren Brown, first-year probationary elementary teacher at Marshall Great Works School, BA 01, 43,843, prorated to start date of November 19th, 2020, school year 2021.
Second that.
Matt, thank you. John?
We're really fortunate that Lauren has been our long-term sub at the Great Works School, and I know I mentioned a couple of meetings ago, but we had a staff member who was in a one-year position for us who was doing a really nice job, but was offered a full-time position beyond this year, and so obviously for that person, for their life, it made the most sense, so that they had to resign, and unfortunately, Lauren applied for the position. We interviewed a number of candidates, and she was our selection, which is exciting. Lauren, knows the students in the building. She's also a former Marshall grad, which is always kind of nice to be able to see, one of our alumni or alumni be able to return to our district to give back. We're really excited about her, and just to kind of go to Great Works School to see her interacting with the kids, and just kind of see the positive energy that she exudes. We're really excited to have her join us.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you.
And I want to be clear, just so everyone knows, this is a one-year only position. This is not a full-time position. This is one of our COVID positions that we have in place. So I just want to make sure.
Thank you. The next four motions are on the first readings of the policies that we discussed briefly in the policy committee update. I'll entertain a motion, please, for approving the first reading of ACAA.
Okay,
I'll do it.
I move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy student discrimination and harassment complaint procedure, ACAA-R.
I think you actually got ahead of us by one.
Oh, I did. I am so sorry. Let's start over. I move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy harassment and sexual harassment of students, ACAA.
Second.
Jen, thank you. So as we discussed, this is basically replacing what we have in our system currently with the recommendation of Drummond and Woodson. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Just a lot more detail. I think, and particularly in the procedure part of this, again, Title IX has some substantial changes, and so this all has an effect in kind of, the investigation procedures and things like that. So, and a cross-reference that we needed to change that will come up
Yeah.
in a moment.
I don't think the spirit of the policy has changed in any major way.
No,
and
no,
I don't think the protections have been lessened in any way either.
No, just the
Yeah.
procedures are a little bit different.
Yep.
You know,
Any other comments or questions? All in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you. May I have a motion, please, on the associated procedure? Yes.
I move we approve the first reading and discussion of policy student discrimination harassment complaint procedure ACAA-R.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jen. Same commentary. This is a much more involved procedure. There's many more steps to it. As Jen mentioned in the update earlier, there are requirements around training of the people who will conduct the investigations, all of which will be incorporated here and will be in compliance with. Did I miss anything, John? Is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
Nope.
No. So again, this is the language recommended to us by Drummond and Woodson. Are there any other questions?
the only thing that I would add is that the reason we didn't, so you're going to see that the policy committee kind of fell at a funny time, so we have kind of 2 policy committee meetings worth of policies here. The reason that we didn't include these policies initially was because of the policy that we'll get to in a moment, where this the ACAE, we needed to rename that, and so we just wanted to do it all at one time. So just wondering why there's a little bit of a disconnect, why for some first readings, some second readings, this is why. So,
Our policy committee has been busy.
yes, we're on task.
Yes, we are on task. No further questions then? All in favor, please? That's 5-0. Thank you. And then I think, yes, may I have a motion, please, for first reading and discussion of JICIA? That's inconvenient. Does somebody have, do we have to get up and move? Oh, is that, wow.
There's been a lot of middle school dances I was at in here. I didn't know that you have to do that. So. That's right.
That's hilarious.
I'll move that we approve the first reading and discussion of revision of policy ACAE with change of code to JICIA, weapons, violence, and school.
Second.
Thank you, Jen. Again, recommended language from Drummond and Woodson. The one change, and Jen mentioned this as well, I'll mention it again. The one change that we made to the recommended language that Drummond and Woodson gave to us was to eliminate the paragraph on the exception around the hunter's breakfast, which is not something that we do in this area of the state, but is something that's much more common in other parts of the state. We didn't feel like we needed to have that language in there. So if you were looking for your hunter's breakfast, now's the time to vote no. Any other questions or comments? This does have a specific paragraph in it around use of other weapons in instructional activities. A number of years ago, we came across this in our policy, specifically in connection with the archery course that was being taught at the Great Work School. And so it's good that this exception at board discretion has been incorporated into the language. Okay. If there are no other questions, then all in favor? 5-0. No hunter's breakfast for you. Okay, and then the last policy we'll vote on tonight is the truancy policy. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the first reading and discussion of policy truancy JHB.
A second.
Was that Lisa? Yes, thank you, Lisa. All right, there have been, again, recommended updates from Drummond and Woodson. John, this is particularly meaningful to us as we deal with COVID, right?
very timely.
Yeah.
And so just, truancy is a spiking issue where disengagement with kids right now around education is increasing, and so particularly in the remote environment, and so really trying to be able to work with families. And this is basically what it says is that you have to send your child to school. It's basically the big idea here, right? And so we want to work with families to be able to do that. And so this gives us some type of legal leverage if all other paths don't work for us, to be able to say, this is a non-negotiable. You must be in school, and these are the offerings that we have. And so changes in the law is going to change the process that we have to do. It does, get to a point where there could be an opportunity where Department of Human Services could be involved, or the District Attorney's Office could be involved if a child does not attend school. And so it's just important for us to be up to date with that as we have a conversation with families that is fact-based, legal-based, and reflects on our policy.
Any questions? All in favor? 5-0.
And basically, like, if we have 52 cards in our deck, this is the 52nd card.
Yeah.
This is kind of that last card that we have to be able to
Not the
play.
card you want to have to play.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Fair enough. All right. We are scheduled to go into executive session. Before we do, Scott, anything you wanted to tell us?
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Holland. I'm Scott Bruning, your Director of Special Services. I think that given the fact that we had an event today, I changed my tack a little bit so you folks can understand the proactive things that still continue in each of the departments at the office, including the Student Services Department. So these are the long-term projects we've been working on. Some are completed, some are in process, but all of them have begun. So we've standardized agendas for IEP meetings, so across the district, people have a frame for that. We've just finished and are engaging in a pilot for a remote reading intervention program for our struggling learners, in person and remote, so we can offer them something more. When they're home, we're taking a look at your pre-referral process and your data collection and how we do that. We just had an IEP compliance training for all the special education and related service staff. We're just about to complete an inventory of all the special education assessments within the districts. They're scattered throughout buildings, and we need to know where things are before we do double purchases. We've been working with the middle and high school on how to give some more learning opportunities to your more vulnerable learners. We're taking a look at that. You have 274 special education students in the district. We're just about to finish all the individual remote learning plans for those students, so families know what to expect in case we go remote. That's been a monumental task. We're nearing the completion of the backlog of evaluations that were caused by the first shutdown. And then in December, we have a training for everybody on how to administer the assessments remotely in case we have to do that again. So this situation doesn't occur again. And that's about it. So, and I didn't hear, and your Aptitude onboarding is well underway.
Yes.
And so
It looks nice.
all I have to report to you. That's it. Any questions? Yeah, I thought it was important that, you get news like this today.
Yep.
And when you're not interacting with it all the time, it sort of looks like you're just reacting to things, but there's so many proactive things going on in your district at the same time that I think for board members you need to know that.
Yep. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did just want to let you know, Tony's still out of work right now. He'll be back shortly, so that's why he wasn't here tonight. And obviously with what was happening with the high school, I wanted Rob to be able to get the communications out to families, and that's why, I just said that he didn't need to be here this evening.
For
So
sure.
Just so you understand.
For sure,
They just
yeah.
didn't blow it off.
No.
So,
No. Lots going on.
yeah.
Okay. In that case, may I have a motion, please, to enter into the executive session?
I'll make a motion that we enter into executive session. At-
Please read as is. It's important that the motion be read as
I
is.
will make a motion that we enter into executive session, labor contract proposal discussions, 1 MRSA 4056D.
second.
Was that Jen? Yes, thank you.
At 8:04.
All in favor? That's 5-0. We are in executive session. Thank you. Thank you all.
I asked Brian to stay.
Yep. Okay.